Were you saying something? You were muted.
Yeah, I was just saying, well, a big meeting tonight, there were only three of us, but now there's four, so it's like, oh, okay.
We'll get there. Well, I saw we were overlapping the Energy Committee meeting, which may knock out a few of our regular guests, and they got all sunny and nice on us, so you never know. But I would hope we get a couple more attenders.
Summer's here.
Hi, Rob.
How is everybody?
Oh, very well. It's been quite a nice May.
Lovely.
Hi, Mary.
Hey, Ellen. Hi, Mary. Hi, Rob.
Hey,
So we have Annette. We don't yet have Ernie. Let's give him a minute. And then we'll see. Like I said, I know because we are a week later than normal, than our normal time, we overlap with the Energy Committee. So there may be some people who can't attend both. But I would think Ernie, we can wait a minute for Ernie. Anything on the agenda, Mary, while we're waiting? Let's jump in. I don't want to wait. Ernie will jump in if he can. I think we can agree on the agenda if it's just the two of us. Okay, that's Francis. Okay, let's get started. Mary, it's just the two of us, so we just agree on the agenda. We agree to agree on the agenda. You're muted.
Yep, we agree to agree. All set.
Okay, all right. Do we have public comment for items not on the agenda? All right. We've clearly got the right things on the agenda. It's a correspondence, and actually, if we want to, it may be worth flipping. Theoretically, we should have an organizational meeting, the first meeting after May, whatever. So we're kind of in limbo unless we have an organizational meeting. So maybe let's flip items 3 and 4, and then jump into our organizational meeting. I was going to, Mary, if you're willing, I was going to nominate you to be our facilitator / lead for this subcommittee. Is that something you're willing to do?
Yep, I'd be willing to do that.
Okay, I would be willing to continue on with clerking, so
Thank you. That's great.
I think if we agree to that, we'll get Ernie to rubber stamp it if he comes on, but I'm pretty sure he'll be okay with that.
Okay. Otherwise, he can do it, right?
Otherwise, he can do one.
Otherwise, he can do it. So it just depends where he wants to be. So there you go.
Yes, we will give him ample opportunity to volunteer if he signs on. Okay, so that's our organizational meeting. I think that I don't want to bother with, well, actually, I will hand it over to you. I was just going to say, I don't want to go into the sort of process details and subcommittee things that we talked about at the planning commission meeting, because the short answer is this: I'd rather that be dealt with at the planning commission level, and this is an advisory board to the planning commission. We are not a voting board. We are not a decision-making board. We are a working group in the service of the planning commission. So we should not get particularly uptight about our own process, other than we follow the open meeting law, which means we do minutes in a timely fashion and we do agendas posted in a timely fashion. So that's about the extent of process, other than what we'll talk about at the planning commission.
Great, okay. So now we have the correspondence. I think, Mary, your comments will probably get to when we do the town plan updates for solar siting. That would be my suggestion. Chris Katuki, the new PUC rules, I think that that's kind of part and parcel of what we're trying to think about, and how the new rules will be reflected in the town plan.
Yeah, I just wanted to update on that, because this afternoon, if you saw in that back and forth with Chris, he gave the 2-sentence version of what he thought, and then he offered a more detailed analysis, and I took him up on that offer. And so this afternoon, he clearly knew that we were meeting. So this afternoon, he sent his more detailed version, which is about 5 pages long. It couldn't go in the packet, and it'll go in the next packet, and maybe the PC packet. But just to kind of close the loop on his initial one, I can read the one sentence at the on page 5, which is his thesis. His point is to say that default solar, as it's written in our town plan, is not compatible with the new 5100. And so he has 4 pages before this, but his conclusion is, to sum up, the conclusive presumption of that default statement is not valid because A, advanced designation of sites in municipal plans is no longer authorized. B, the presumption renders meaningless the required evaluation of the 45-day notice. And C, the blanket grant of preferred site status is contrary to PUC policy. So there's detail and references and so forth around that. But just so people are aware, he did follow up with much more detail.
And I think, was that the note that he sent to the Planning and Utility Commission in response to the most recent action on Upper Loveland? Because I saw
not this one that I just got today. It was considerably
similar,
short,
though.
pithier in that in the PUC public comment that he made. This was clear, and this was sent to me and to Pam Smith for the select.
Great.
So just so people are aware, that's part of the correspondence, and it'll be in next time.
Yeah. In Joel Stettenheim's letter, I don't know if there's anything you want to say that was addressed to you. It seems like it was kind of like, this is what we've done, which we knew.
I think he was concerned, I think, that the last meeting was somehow going to be more substantive, and I just said, no, it's an informational meeting, and so he didn't need to come or submit things beforehand. So no, I don't think there's any more on that.
Okay. So so now on the agenda we have the update, the town plan update for solar sightings, the kind of ongoing conversation about that. And Mary, thanks for putting comments and getting notes to us with suggestions. I think that was really the goal of the last meeting, is to gin up some dialogue about what is the right thing to do for the plan. So so I guess you know, from the perspective, I don't know, Jan, whether we want to have you, the kind of planning committee members, I'm not sure on the protocol, have a conversation first, and then Or what's your
I
suggestion?
mean, I think we're a small enough group, and in this, at the subcommittee level, if it doesn't get, if Rob and Mary don't get raucous, I think we can be pretty open. I did just to put it in the back of our heads, one of my questions to this to the group is the mechanics of this editing, or kind of the result of the editing, right? We're going to and say we get multiple comments, so we have section something or other, that has several different edits or input from different sources. That may be, whether it's so Mary put something in about 45% slope, and there's something in there about 25% slope. So my kind of proposal for discussion would be that we compile that as a sum of all those, and we clean it up, but we don't clean it up by choosing one or the other. We're submitting to the planning commission, here's what we've been talking about and what we've been thinking about. And on this section, we had public comment that said it should be 45%, and we had other comments that said it should, because I think what you did around 25% in that draft was really to make it more concrete, to make it say
To make it
must.
concrete and to make it align with some other parts of the town plan around other, although it's very interesting because Mary's suggestion 45 degrees was, gave me reason to go look to see what other states have suggested for citing of plans and what are the kind of requirements, and looked at a number of them. And the 15% is actually seen as a high percentage. So anyways, 45% was certainly out of range of what was the advice of many other places, in particular as they think about hydrology, as they think about soil, as they think about runoff and other things that are important.
Yeah, I think my comment would be, first, I think I'm just throwing it out as a process point of view. We don't have to dig into that particular thing right now, but as a process point of view, I think it would be valuable, or it would be correct in terms of our role vis-a-vis the planning commission we could put our whatever helpful comments in we want. That say, here are the three different versions of this section that we have had under conversation, and here are the highlights of the issues at hand, or something like, because when I said something to, or actually Jeff Goodrich must have read the packet, and he came in and said it was about a technology comment. His point was using what you can use now for helical mounts, where you have two sort of self-screwing things that go into the ground, slope, at least for the arrays, doesn't have anything to do with cutting trees or anything like that, but in terms of mounting the arrays, slope, high slope abilities have gone up with new technology. So it relates to this similar comment we had about just how many acres you need per megawatt related to new technology. So we can have, footnotes in that as we present it.
Okay, Mary.
Yeah, just as a matter of the way we work together, I think it's nice to look around and see what our favorite towns have, or what's the minimum that some towns have, or what towns have the maximum. I think it's actually the way we should go. It should be based on fact and reason. So the angle of repose is 45 degrees. So it's based on the basis of that is physics. And I would hope that, all of our discussions, we base the reason that we do things on fact and physics.
On fact and physics? I would say that there are other things that I would consider as well, which can be aesthetics, which I agree are subjective, not scientific. So we have to use both left and right brains on some of these things. And also, I think I would like to at least understand more about, look, we've got changing technologies, but we also have a lot of other, data that is worth looking at. And I'm not looking at favorite towns. I'm looking at what Massachusetts or Rhode Island, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Vermont, a number of states have looked at. And I think that to the extent that we assume that those are based in fact, then that should be helpful as well.
I would just, it might be not a moot point, but it might be an interesting exercise to simply look at the slope map of Norwich and see how much is above 25 and under 45. And my guess is it's a pretty small bunch of acres in Norwich. And so it may not make that much difference in the conversation, just from that fact alone.
That's true, although, Jan, if you were to go to a lesser slope, as so many states have done, then there may actually be between 15 and 45. So just to say that, I think we need to understand that better. I did want to at least note that Valley News is present on this call, just in case other people had not noted that.
Yeah, I saw that.
Thanks for joining us, Francis.
Point out, yeah. Hi, Francis. So the other, in related topic, I'd be curious, and we can kind of fit these things in as we go. But I would like Annette's opinion a little bit on the 5100, because we talked, and actually Chris Katuki in his note references our conversations and my minutes from the previous meeting, where we said, and actually TROC agreed with this, that the new 5100 didn't affect our ability to have default preferred. And so Chris is reading that, and he actually said, please share my memo with Annette. She has a lot of good information. So at some point in the conversation, and I don't want to ping around too much here, but I would like to touch base on that. And I would, sorry for jumping around, but the one other thing on the slopes issue, the consistent message is always we need to be specific about what development where and what's the definition of development. So you could say it's 15% slopes or it's 25% slopes for tree cutting on wet soil, for actual arrays, for a house, for a septic system. You have to combine the definition of development with the criteria and the value that you're talking about. Otherwise, it's not helpful.
Could you send me Chris's memo so I could look at it?
I will. Yep, I will.
And I did just pull up the slope layer for Norwich in the ANR Atlas, and it's quite colorful. If you want me to screen share, I could show it to you.
Please do.
Mary, do you know if I can screen share?
Jan has the controls on that.
Hey,
So.
I can. Here you go.
Okay, okay.
I don't think I've limited it.
So there you go. That's Norwich.
So red is greater than 25.
Red is greater than 25.
All right. So we
20
have
to
a fair
25.
bit. So we have a fair bit of area.
You do. It's spread all over. So
Again, you have to decide what access roads go where, and whether you're, what is it? What are you talking about for specific use?
And I will note that the slope language is, I'm sorry Ernie's not here because he seems very good on hydrology. It is about water quality. And so that's the reason for the general 15% being adopted by other states. It's all about hydrology and water quality. So when you do construction on disturbed sites, and then you have a rainstorm, and then the sediment runs off. And so there's, the greater the slope, the greater the velocity of the runoff, and the more scouring and taking more sediment down.
Mhm.
And what I'm showing you is the A&R atlas, just the slope layer. Okay?
Thanks,
Mhm.
Annette. Okay. Mary, is it something new, or are you going to respond to?
Yeah, I'd just like to respond to that with a lot of the sites around Norwich are not disturbed, but they're sloped with bedrock underneath them. So there's not a lot of water quality. There's not a lot of water flowing through that bedrock. So it's very specific. So I hope that we don't dismiss things out of hand without looking at the geology and what rationale appear, is relevant to what decision, but based on fact.
Okay, thank you. And get back to the letter here. So Jan, so that was one of the things. So if we just add these other comments to the proposal, happy to do that. I think that one of the things is around this siting and identifying, if you wanted to prioritize the power lines. I mean, one of the things we talked about in the last meeting was, should we identify some land in town that we would call industrial, or something of that ilk. And so Mary's proposed that land be the land, at least one group of it be the land near the power line, to identify that as industrial, at least as a starting point, and then have to then overlay other concerns or issues around what the slope might be.
Just to clarify, when you say
yeah.
power line, we mean three-phase power. Not the big power line that runs, there are two power lines that run across Norwich. We're talking about three-phase power for hooking into.
So that would be the area that would be identified, or one of the areas that would be identified as an industrial zone. I think it probably would be worth talking with people too who live in those areas, just to get their feedback on it. Because when we start to put together a town plan, we want to make sure that people are supportive of what we're proposing. And so that could be something, if that's a proposal that you'd like to put. I suspect that asking people if that's their desire would be advisable. We don't want to put something in that's going to get immediate backlash from folks.
Well, it's certainly one of the, what we're talking about is a bunch of weighting functions. Near, proximity to three-phase power is clearly a positive weighting function to a site, as is its topography, its water, its visibility, its scenic, that there are 10 weighting functions, some of which are so strongly weighted that they're basically prohibitive, and some that are, nice to haves, if you will.
It's a very small area. Would you like me to show you the map of where it is in Norwich?
Yeah, that'd be great, Annette. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm just curious, because we talked about this on one other site. If this is the presence of three-phase power, is there a kind of a standard distance off of these lines where it becomes prohibitive and you just wouldn't do it? Like Lamperti site on New Boston is nowhere near any of this, but 150 kW without three-phase power, what's the size of the project and the distance from three-phase where it becomes just untenable?
It's all about the money, and the developer pays the cost. So from a developer-driven process that we have now, they would want to be as close as possible.
Is there a cutoff in size, like you can't do a 500 kW without three-phase?
I think so. The fact is that in Vermont, we have areas that just don't have substation capacity and things like that. So it really is very much site specific and site by site. That's why I think that the utilities should be asked these questions, because they know better than anyone. I mean, you could ask a solar developer and that they would be able to answer those questions. But as you see, you've got, I'm not sure the borders are not on here, but you're really talking about a very small part of the town.
Hmm.
And in general, as we saw it happened in Sudbury, when they were trying to identify preferred sites, they went around, some guy went around and talked to every farmer that he could find and everybody that seemed like they were in a good location, and to get their buy-in for it before they put it into the town plan.
Mhm.
You have a small enough area that would seem to be possible. And again, with the overlay that I gave you, you could do the overlay with the 3-phase and look at whose properties are there and what's there. What are the characteristics of it? Would it even be a viable site? Just because it's next to 3-phase power doesn't necessarily mean it's viable.
Mhm. Mary?
So, first of all, I wouldn't care to put solar in the same category as industrial. Industrial, I think of loading docks, a lot of traffic. You have to have water, you have to have septic, you're producing things, it's factories. Solar arrays are really different than that. They're really not intrusive. So I'm not advocating for putting industrial areas near the 3-phase power lines. I'm advocating for solar capability separate as a prioritized item rather than the general statement for industrialized. And also allowing it to be there does not mean that the person has to change their land to that, but it means that if they're prioritized and they want to move or sell their land, they know that that land is prioritized for solar, so they could find a buyer for their land who would pay top price. It's not saying to the farmer, you have to have a solar array on your land. Everybody can do what they want.
Okay, thanks. So the other is you're adding a suggestion that that let's see, land designated for development of solar energy generation systems must be exempt from limitations based on visual considerations, provided that the solar panels do not rise above the tree line on visually prominent ridge lines. And so I think that would want some more discussion by people in town, especially in terms of the glare issues that places are facing, as well as maybe not factual, but aesthetics that are important to some people. It certainly was a priority in the last town plan. And so I suspect that there would be discussion at the planning committee about that. Yeah, Jan.
Well, yeah, and I certainly would, personally, I take aesthetics, to be very important. And I know that different people I've talked to, there's certainly a block of people that do, and there's clearly a very strong difference of opinion or just reaction that people have when they see a solar array. Some people get a warm, wonderful feeling, and some people get a sort of nasty, glaring, jarring feeling. And that's we just have to take that into account. I did want to ask specifically about the because about the law relative to different types of development. So in the state law, if you wanted to put, say, the other way around, if you wanted to require screening of arrays, PV arrays, or visually mitigating things, you can do that, but you can't. It should be consistent with what you do to other development, other structures, say, and also it can't preclude the use of solar. You can't put so many constraints on that it's impossible to do it on that site.
Right.
So my question actually is what's being proposed here is sort of the flip side of that. treating solar in a special way on the positive side rather than on the negative side. And is that allowed? If you can't do it on the negative side, can you do it on the positive side? You see what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but what the comments are in the town plan before I sent mine in are mostly trying to set up lots of different roadblocks for solar. And so I thought the town
The
plan
current town plan, Mary, has roadblocks for
very
solar?
clear on what we do approve and why we want it.
I'm sorry, I just didn't understand. You said the current town plan puts up roadblocks for solar?
The edits that.
Oh, the
that
edits,
you and
okay.
Annette had put in are really roadblocks. They weren't facilitating the generation of energy that does not emit greenhouse gases.
But
And
what
it behooves
would be
all of
this,
us to do
what would
that.
be a specific comment that we put in that was a roadblock?
That the visual is approaching that, the glare is approaching that, all of
Yeah.
that can be handled, in different ways. You're just getting very, very specific
Yeah.
about ways to set off lots of little wee roadblocks. Instead, let's work together and find out, hey, where should we put it?
Mm.
The
So I
fires
guess
in
I would-
Canada
yeah.
are even affecting Vermont. Ticks are here. We are in climate change now, and it behooves us to do something to generate renewable energy that does not emit greenhouse gases. We need to do our part.
I think that current town plan is a very open-ended, and the goal of the committee was not to tweak it to make all sorts of little changes that put it kibosh on it, but rather to give some clarity to the planning commission so that when we get a proposal, there are very specific things that we can review, and the goal was actually to provide a comment so we can have this dialogue here and with the planning commission. So I think it's reaching its goal, but I think we need to be fair in how we characterize what we're doing here. Because there was, I think glare is a real issue. It's a real physical issue that has been, factual, as you would, using your language. And I think that thinking about how does the town consider the impact of glare is important as somebody wants to make a big clear cut and put up something that will assess it and see if it does.
Do you
Annette, did you
consider
have a comment?
glare of major picture windows?
I'm sorry, Annette, did you have a comment?
Yes,
You
I
joined us.
just wanted to bring you back to what the PUC is looking for and why things like addressing glare matter. So the PUC takes a look at it with an enhanced energy plan, two different things. They'll give substantial deference to the land conservation language in the town plan. So for instance, if you identify the scenic resources that you want to conserve, that's a land conservation measure. And the other thing is specific policies. So I guess I would maybe say you currently have a town plan with a pretty specific policy, which is everything is a preferred site except for 3 different areas. Now, that's more along the lines of what I think Mary is advocating for, and she's not interested in placing any constraints on this technology. So that's the challenge that you have, is that what the PUC wants is clear guidance on what are your specific policies. And if you don't have any, then they have nothing on which to make their decision. And so it's challenging, but setbacks, tangible things that can be addressed through a siting process that goes through the PUC is what you need to be thinking about in terms of, I mean, I think Mary would view them as limitations, but that is exactly what the PUC is looking for. So I hope that helps. It's
Mhm.
not easy. I appreciate that it's not.
But I do understand that, I mean, certainly if you take off, starting what we have as the current town plan, where you have this massive swath of default preferred, as soon as you remove that word default, then you have increased the constraints in a sense. I would rather do the work to take that off and then be specific about what we're trying to protect and where we're trying to promote it. I think Mary's point, which I would agree with, is
Which Mary?
sorry, Mary Albert's point that we should work together to find places for it, I think is a perfectly legitimate point to say, and it goes hand in hand. Just saying that the whole town is default isn't necessarily a better way to get us more solar in Norwich than digging in, doing the exercise that says no more strongly to a chunk of area, but says yes more strongly to a different chunk of area. So I actually think that being specific both ways is what we're looking for. I mean, I'm not looking to try and box it in that just says no, 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 and then sit back. I mean, I've got 12 kilowatts on my roof above me right now. I'm perfectly happy with solar.
I
And
think I should also point out that this preferred site language is only relevant to 500 kilowatt projects up to that size. So it's only in the net metering rule. And so where there is a desire for larger projects to be on landfills and quarries and things like that, the bigger picture includes these larger arrays.
so wait, can you clarify that? You mean that some of the work that we're doing to be specific about where to put solar, both positive and negative and constraining in the town plan, will help us with larger than 500s?
Yes, yes. So for instance, Shaftesbury's been dealing with a 20 megawatt solar array. And
Wow.
they didn't have an enhanced energy plan. And it's an absolutely gorgeous site of fields and forests. And their town plan was very, very weak. In fact, it said, we are not taking a position on anything and we're going to let the Department of Public Service decide. So they're going through the exercise of doing an enhanced energy plan. And I'm not working with them, I just see what's going on. This solar project is proposing to cover 85 acres with solar panels, but it's on a parcel that's over 100 acres. So in the revision to the town plan, they are talking about putting a limit in of 20 acres for a solar project. So that's one way of placing a limitation. Other towns have said, we don't want anything bigger than 2 megawatts or 5 megawatts. So you could look at how many acres a size, set that as a limit. Or now we don't know how the PUC is going to look at these things because it's never been adjudicated yet. But the only thing we know is that in terms of a legal standard, the Vermont Supreme Court has upheld a specific number on slopes. But if you say you can't build on steep slopes, that's not specific. But if you say 15% or 25%, that's regulatory. So I would think that it's possible that a limitation on size or on the either by acre or megawatt may pass that test, but ultimately the PUC can issue a decision on these enhanced energy plans, but it will be litigated to the Supreme Court, and they're the ones that are going to have to decide what language is regulatory and what isn't.
Am I remembering, did we put anything in, was there any proposed edit that we looked at last meeting on above 500s?
We noted that we should put something in, Jan, but we did not develop it. We noted that it was not, it was just not noted, so that it needed to be put in so that we don't so that we're clear about what we want, and then as a town, and then that can be the basis for decision making.
Or it's here's what the plan says about below 15 kW, and here's what it says 15 to 150, 150, 500, greater than 500,
Right.
and you have whatever your policies are
Requirements.
associated with those different entities.
Exactly.
I
Mhm.
recently reviewed the report of the Solar Siting Task Force, and I hadn't looked at it since it came out in 2016. I will send that to you because it contains some very interesting things, and I'll send you my highlighted report because I noted the things that haven't been done. And one of them was the idea that municipalities, there should be a group that came together to look at whether or not municipalities should be more involved in the regulation of projects smaller than 15 kilowatts. I was surprised to see that in there. So you may see some things in there that are relevant, but it is the report that ultimately led to what is going on now with all these enhanced energy plans.
Great, thank you.
Hmm.
Let's see. Back here. Getting back to the start here. Land use actions, stating that we have at least 200 acres of land in Norwich must be identified and mapped for priority use in development of solar farms that are sufficient to power at least the current electricity demand of Norwich. That would be an interesting thing for the town plan to say. I don't know that whether there is 200 acres of land in Norwich. I know, Jan, you've gone out to try to identify how much there is. But I also would note that TRORC at one point did give quotas to every town, and then they walked that back. So it might be interesting to note and understand better why that might have been. But I don't know that it's in the town plan to say how many acres we would identify for solar farms as opposed to other uses.
So
You know,
what
again-
would we, I mean, I did a very preliminary on kind of the easy ones, like if you did the Monshire Museum's parking lot and
Yeah.
Lee Meadow parking lots and so forth. And you're talking, just as an example, Monshire Museum is 2.5 acres or 2 acres, something like that is the size. And we just don't have a lot. King Arthur's is small, we don't have a lot of big buildings with big parking lots, things like that. And then I looked at the site, the old Leonard Cook site next to the highway,
Right.
which is, in people's minds, industrial, and it's next to three-phase power and so forth. That's 8 acres, maybe 8 or 9 acres. So, but I do think what it brings up, and the point is, we should, and it's a challenge to the group again to look for both. Where do we want to constrain it specifically, and where do we want to promote it and specifically? And so my question is to that word prioritize or promote, and it goes back kind of to what Chris Katuki was saying. To what degree with the new state regs can we specifically promote a site beforehand? His contention is really, you're not allowed, the planning commission is not allowed to say this is a preferred site until we read the 45-day notice official application. And they had reasons relative to neighbors notice and so forth. But if the intent of that is to not make the decision about preferred until you see an application, what does it mean to prioritize or be very specific about this particular site? Go for it.
I mean, it's not that different from what we said, Jan, last week, which is like, let's identify, and whatever term you want to use, I'll use industrial. Let's identify areas for industrial or solar development. say this is where we want them, rather than saying the whole town is open to it, except for these areas. And so whether or not 200 is the right number, I have no idea. But if there were identified areas, that's, I think, in keeping with the earlier edits. So plenty of common ground. Mary.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks. So it doesn't have to be 200 acres all at once. It can be different plots that add up to 200 acres. But
Oh, right,
as
we
an-
understand, yeah.
But as an affluent community that is in the midst of a global climate change, we saw the smoke from Canada. We've all been bit by ticks and sick. It behooves us to have a goal, our own goal, on how we can address the emission problem. And so I think that whatever that number of acres is, I think I got it out of an old energy report. I'm not on the energy committee, but it should be our goal to use solar or wind, but I know wind is out for Norwich, use solar to be able to eventually create and put as much clean energy on the grid as we are consumed in Norwich. And so you can look up and figure out what the number of the consumption is. We should be responsible enough to generate that amount of renewable energy, whether it's used downtown Norwich, whether it's on the grid, whatever it is, we got to do our part. I think should be a guiding post for this town plan.
Rob.
Yeah, in relationship to that, in relationship to the thought of adding constraints to the positioning of solar siting, it behooves the planning commission to inform the public if there's a possibility that with the proposed constraints and regulations, limitations that are coming along, whether or not there exists in Norwich the capacity to provide a balancing solar generation to our usage. And so that means looking at the areas near three-phase power with additional constraints placed on the land, how much land is left, and is there enough to produce enough electricity to equal the use of the town. And if we are not able to do that, the public should know and be able to voice their opinion as to whether these constraints that are being proposed are too strict.
Okay, we would have the public would have a chance to opine on that. It's interesting too, because there are other ways obviously to mitigate climate change, and one is to retain our forests, retain open space, retain good water quality, etc. And so I think our town plan has been very very focused on the energy, and I think it's trying to get a balance. Mary.
Thank you. The IPCC, was it last year or the year before, got agreement from all nations that we are going to phase out power generation globally. That's our goal, that uses fossil fuels. We cannot continue to emit. You cannot continue to load up the atmosphere and think that this tree or that tree is even going to come close to what is needed. We need to change the way we generate electricity to renewable energy or to nuclear. So solar, wind, nuclear, have your choice. We must transition away from fossil fuels, period. It's hard.
I think just as a point, I don't think we need to have this is the planning committee. Our focus right now is looking at our town planning report, not really focusing on global issues, IPCC. I think we all have concern about biodiversity, about climate, about animals, about lots of different things. But our goal right now is to try to work on the town plan. And that, I think I want to just ask us to keep our focus on that, as opposed to solving every problem.
Yeah.
Rob,
Well, yeah, I would
Focus
just,
on the
I would second that.
regenerate our energy renewably. Within
Mary,
just the town.
you have made your point. Rob, please.
Yeah.
So the the thing I would like to point out is that the status quo, which means not changing our balance and ratio of undeveloped land, of forests and existing forests, etc., has been inadequate to resolve the problem. The status quo contributes to the continued degradation of the climate in Norwich and the world at large. And so leaving things in the exact state they're in is not likely to be beneficial for the town in the long run.
And Mary?
Yes, please.
Well, just, I do, and I've said this at the planning commission level as well, that we do have to constrain ourselves to the to the venue we're working in. We're a municipal planning commission. State law matters a lot to us. We have our own views on global policy and so forth, but we need to stay on the topic at hand. Otherwise, we won't get anything done. Interestingly, just as a total aside, in terms of, is Norwich by itself contributing to the problem and the different ways of looking at that? It's actually in the appendix of the current town plan, where it says, here's the number of acres of forest we have. Here's the number of acres it takes per ton of CO2 to mitigate, to offset. And it does the math, and it says our forests offset the carbon for 4,600 people. So if you just looked at Norwich and put a big bubble over it and said, what are we emitting? It actually says we have 3,300 people instead of 4,600. We're doing better than even. Now, I'm not advocating that as a reason not to do solar or anything, but there are different ways to look at it. And I do agree that we need to stick with what do we need to know and talk about to get the best town plan.
Annette?
Yeah, I want to make 2 points. One is I live off grid with solar, so I have for 35 years. And when the sun goes down, I'm not using solar energy. So the idea that we're going to completely get off fossil fuels is just, I'm sorry, it's not realistic. Making solar panels requires a lot of fossil fuels and very high heat to make the polysilicon. The idea of trying now to identify the acreage to set aside for solar, I'm hoping there are going to be some improvements in technology. And I see that coming along. And so the other point I wanted to make is, Jan, thank you for sending me Chris Katuki's memo. And the part of it that I find a little puzzling, and I'm not sure what it means, but he says it eliminates the designation of sites in the town plan, which is important. It's an important point to what you're talking about if it's true. He said the net metering, the old rule defined a preferred site to include a specific location designated in duly adopted municipal plan. The new net metering rule eliminates this provision, but retains designation by letter. Putting something in your town plan, that guidance doesn't come from the PUC. It comes from the Department of Public Service and the guidance that they put in for enhanced energy plans. So it will require reviewing that. I'll take a look at it and send along what I find. But you know, he may be right about what the PUC rules have, but they simply went silent on that. But I think that it's been eliminated by the Department of Public Service in their things that can go into an enhanced energy plan, but I have to check that.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, when I asked Peter Gregory and Kyle at the Two Rivers, the same question. How does this affect our plan and enhanced energy plans and so forth? They minimized the difference. They said, well, no, but it's not like everybody is jumping up and down to rewrite their enhanced energy plans because of these new, what came out in March. And so their read was not the same as Chris's. So I think we need to put that all in the hopper, and but I do think that it focuses a question, which is, can we specifically, proactively state where we want solar? And I'm going on the assumption that yes, we can, and that we should, because that's what balances protecting the things we want to protect. And so until we really get a definitive rule, and to your point, Annette, that may be whoever is the first that takes it to the Supreme Court. But until we get a really definitive statement otherwise, I would still advocate for us looking quite specifically at where we do want to put it.
And I think, just to be really clear, the goal of this exercise in looking at the town plan was predicated by the time when the T-Rock denied the solar, the proposal for the certificate of public good for the land up in the forest block. And I think that caused, I know that caused the town planning commission to pause and say, kind of what specifically are the guidelines? And that is what we are trying to ensure that the town plan is. It provides guidelines so that people in town who aspire to put a solar array up, or developers who are eyeing Norwich as a place to do that, or individuals who want to do it on their land in some large scale, have guidance about what the town is, what the town will approve and what the town will not approve, because the language in the town plan as it currently stands does not provide that kind of guidance. And I think we can all agree that that has created confusion and disagreement. And so providing clarity for the town plan will do that, because the town plan will guide what happens to this town and people who live here and care about this town. And I know we all do. That's really important. And that is the goal. And so I want that to be crystal clear that is the goal. It's been stated by some others that was a different goals. That is the goal, clarity.
Yeah. Well, and I would also point out that the current town plan, with its supposed lack of constraints, has not resulted in a huge number of solar sites being permitted.
Right.
So to the degree that a little clarity on both sides, here are the constraints, but here are the encouraged, I think we could move this ball along. Right now, anything that's that murky it scares developers. It just isn't a good working environment. But the proof is in the pudding, in the sense that just take the last 5 years and say how many megawatts of solar have been put up, other than rooftop solar on people's houses, not much. So how do we do better is a perfectly valid way to ask that.
Or how do we encourage more rooftop solar all around town?
Or yes, and all the flips, the demand side of the energy equation, the electricity equation. How do we make it so that even with, I would love it if you said, even with increased heat pumps and increased electric vehicles, Norwich is striving for no net electricity gain or something, some kind of demand side management.
And then we'd have to see what all the new AI is going to do to suck more power out of everything. There's the demand keeps growing in ways that are even in towns that are actually, especially in wealthy towns. So I think, hitting both sides of that is going to be really important.
So I just
Okay,
picked up
yeah.
the Department of Public Service guidance document, and it has some good guidance on how to identify preferred sites. Would you like me to show it to you?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
It's got a little graphic. Let me get rid of that. So it,
Yeah,
it
we've seen those on various town
yeah.
plans.
So back here, it talks about identifying locations for preferred must not be impractical. And it says that it's particularly important to identify these because a specific location in a duly adopted municipal plan is one way for the net metering project to qualify as being on a preferred site. So Chris may be right that that's been taken out of there. Um, but it has not been taken out of the Department of Public Service guidance document. So I don't really know. I also don't really know if it matters. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you're trying to write a document that is identifying parcels where you want solar, and that will be helpful to the PUC regardless of whether it's in their standards or not. But, go back and look at this, and I mean, they have a link to Colchester's preferred sites policy. And I don't know if you've looked at any of the other things, but they're recommending people look at that. So
Mhm.
it
Well, it's still the new version of 5100 says, quote, consistent with applicable policies in
Right.
their respective plans. So that's pretty broad. And so if your specific policies in your town plan is that you're going to overlay these 5 criteria of three-phase power and scenic and, various other, and encourage solar on those properties, then that is consistent with applicable policies in our plan.
And then this language about ensuring the land conservations and policies, this about habitat connectors and forest blocks is placing a positive value on that. And that's something that you have a lot of forest and presumably the habitat connectors. And so this balancing act of uh, protecting nature is important. And so whether it be appropriate to treat forests not otherwise constrained or deemed unsuitable for energy development. These are the sorts of things that when you are not just looking at where you want solar, but also what values in your town do you want to maintain. That's another aspect of this. So it's uh, identifying that for climate change, there are positives associated with uh, protecting forests and wildlife habitat.
Thank you.
No,
Okay.
I think it would be a good exercise as part of this process to be able to, and to the point, it doesn't have to be 200 acres when we start, but it would be valid. It would be a good, not a gesture, but a good balance of pro and con to say, if you look at the criteria we're talking about, and do essentially a mapping exercise, these are the sorts of places you get to. And that makes it real and it puts it in front of people. I know I was on the board of the solid waste committee that cited the landfill in Heartland. And we had a list of criteria a mile long that took us a year to put together with consultants. And we got zero attention whatsoever until we did a mapping exercise that said, here's where the landfill might be. And then it was a very interested crowd.
Oh, yeah.
And so you can have people that will say, I love solar, I want solar everywhere. And then you say,
Here you
boom,
go.
your neighbor's field right there, or your field it matches these. So you can agree to criteria all day long. But as soon as you map it, it starts to get real and it makes for a very good conversation.
Right.
So I
And
think
that's
we
why-
should
yeah.
just do that. I mean, and okay, it'll be 30 acres, not 200 acres in terms of the first conversation, but, or you say, oh, if we lower either the type of forest block or the scenic criteria or the distance to three-phase, oh, it can go from 20 acres possible to 50 acres possible, but here are the delta acres.
Right.
I think it really is a good exercise to get people talking and thinking.
Great. Okay. I think we are at the part of approving minutes.
Yeah, just, so what do you think? I'd like to be able to set some expectations so that when we're in the next planning commission meeting and we're doing the report out of this group, what would we say? Okay, we are going to have some draft edits to look at from this group in one more meeting, two more meetings, you know, what would we want to say for that expectation?
Well, I think right now we opened it up for comment, public comment for now, what, 5 weeks, Jan? Is that correct? So I think we've gotten public comments. So it seems to me that putting it on the agenda for an upcoming meeting might be helpful. And more as advisory, perhaps, to get the advice of the other members of the planning commission as we're doing it, because they have not been updated. I don't want to go with too much of a, I think we were, you know, like, let's get their feedback and then iterate back in this group. Does that
Yeah,
sound
I'm
like
just,
right?
I'm hearing what the planning commission asked, which was, okay, solar sighting subcommittee, you go off and do some work and bring us back something.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty specific to look at. And so I look at that, at this round of edits plus some public comment. And I'm not sure it meets that threshold yet, or I just, if we put it into the big group, is it gonna be messy? You know, I would certainly wanna, if we said we're gonna go back to the big group, I would want at least one more meeting with just that in mind, to say, okay, and everybody does their homework before, to say, no, we're gonna go through the document as it stands, and we're gonna feather together the different comments that are on each section, and sort of pull out the suggestion, you know, we need to do a scenic inventory, that we need to be more clear on, here are the open policy questions, or, you know.
Yeah.
I just think it needs, at the very least, housekeeping
Okay.
before it's making good use of the planning commission's time.
Very good. Mary?
I also recommend that you send it to the Conservation Committee, the Energy Committee, and whatever, the Historical Committee, and give each of them a week to also provide their input on the plan. I mean, they're already involved with the town on different areas. Give each of those committees a week to put in their edits to the town plan, so that you have more than just this little wee group.
Can we, Mary, you did the magic of turning it into the Word document, and I know there are just the things that would be good to clean up, like everywhere it says Norwich, it says 43 Norwich, or whatever that is.
Yeah.
But that should be pretty simple to just go through.
Do a search and correct.
Review changes and say, make that all capital in Norwich, and get so that we have a decent, clean, it still shows track changes of the things that are real proposed.
Right, but doesn't have all the silliness in it of the transition. Yeah, I can get to that this weekend, not before then, but this weekend.
So is it worth, I guess, to the question of getting more input, you know, one thing we could do is do those cleanups, do meshing of any other public comment. We have Chris Katukis, we have Mary Alberts, we have, and then get the packet out earlier than we normally would. So instead of 5 days before the next meeting, let's get it out 2 weeks before the next meeting. And then in
Anyone
terms
can
of
take, anyone
getting
can put in
another, yeah, then
comments.
you have that time until 5 days before, so that you have a week plus to get comments in, and then those go, then we have a packet to work with for one more meeting of this group to say, okay, now we know what we're going to tidy up and give to the PC for discussion. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yes. Okay, very good.
Okay. With that in mind, I would move to accept the minutes of April, which is it, 30th.
April 30th. So moved.
All right.
Seconded.
Seconded, and that's all we got, so that means they're,
That's it, yeah.
okay. Good.
We've had
So
plenty of public comment, I don't know anymore. Or can we adjourn?
move to adjourn.
Second. Thank you.
Seconded, and it's done.
Bye.
All right, thank you, everyone. So yeah, I will put in the minutes that plan that we are going to get the packet out early, that you're going to clean up what are essentially the typos. And then I can work on it, and we can all work on getting it as clean
input.
as possible. Get the packet out substantially early with a specific request to get comments back into the packet for the next meeting.
Very good. Okay.
All right.
Will do.
Great.
Thanks.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
everybody.